Welcome everyone. Sorry, it's already open. Welcome everyone. We're going to get started in the next few minutes, so if everyone can settle down and grab your seats. Nobody wants to sit with those are my favorite seats. Welcome everyone. Today our speaker is Sister Zahra Billoo. She's a civil rights lawyer and the executive director at the Council of American-Islamic Relations, San Francisco Bay Area. She's known for using her expertise to fight for what's right, and her tireless work continues to inspire and strengthen our community, working to shape a more just future. Passing it over.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so I overheard a conversation among the sisters when I was waiting, and I won't say who it was, they'll know who it was. But as we approach year end, there is all of this, like, what are the things we need to do? And so in the conversation I heard, it was like everybody's making doctor's appointments really quickly because you have to get into that billing cycle. For some of you, it might be paying off a credit card bill. Today for me, this is really basic, but it was cleaning the house. I was like, there's this pile of stuff I've been looking at for 6 months, and I just need to put it all away. And I want to tell you that I'm really proud of myself because it went into the correct places. I didn't just hide it from myself. And so there's this like year-end wrap-up situation going on for a lot of us, I think. For those of you right at work, you may also be like, okay, what do I need to do to finish my goals? Are my reports in? Some of you have already checked out from work. You're still showing up. You're not actually there. But December 31st. So yesterday, a friend of mine, she asked me, she said, like, what are you thinking about for New Year's resolutions? And I almost punched her. I didn't. We're being recorded, don't worry. I didn't punch her. I didn't think about it. But in retrospect, I said, why are you asking me this question? We're just trying a new halal restaurant, like trying not to think about how bad the world is. And so I say all that to say that when we were developing the topic for tonight, the question that we were asking and that we'll talk about is, what are small changes that we can make? And what is the big impact that small changes, small deeds will have this year? I should have from the beginning. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So, have you all had pathways since the Assad family fell in Syria? And have you talked about that together? Okay. The Assad family terrorized Syria for longer than most of you in this room have been alive. I met somebody really kind earlier, and I accidentally called her auntie. And then I learned she's only a few years older than me. The Assad family has been in power, or was in power, for longer than I have been alive. Like, there are people that were released from the prisons in Syria who did not know that Hafiz al-Assad is no longer there. Like, they had no idea that, like, Bashar al-Assad had taken over. That's how long they were in prison. And there are people who were arrested by the father. There are people who were arrested 10 years ago when they tried to rise up against Bashar al-Assad. And so we'll talk about small everyday actions, but one of the things that I get stuck on when I'm thinking about small everyday actions is like, I want to see results. I want to see results right away. And for those of you that followed the Arab Spring, gosh, some of you were probably in middle school when the Arab Spring began. There was both this feeling of elation when people won in certain countries, and then there was this heartbreak when people didn't win, right? And in Syria in particular, Bashar al-Assad torched his entire country, for the most part to the ground, to maintain power. And so to see that now, just in a matter of days, and we can talk about like why it happened and what happened, but what I want us to focus on for just a minute is that a family that terrorized its people for over 50 years, longer than you have been alive, and in the case of the auntie, not auntie, longer than some of your parents have been alive. And it was just like somebody went to a protest, somebody posted a tweet, and people paid for their lives with those small actions. But today, the people of Syria walk free. Now under Israeli air attack. So let's not ever forget to blame the Zionists for their role in this, and sort of the fact that it's so on brand for them to just go kill people. I used to say Israel kills children as a hobby. Like war crimes are a pastime for Israel and Zionists. So that's where I wanted us to start, because we should name that there was a huge development in the Muslim world in the past 2 weeks. And it started with just a few people going to protests. It started with a few people talking to their neighbors and friends. It started with a few people speaking out and taking risks, right? Because if they hadn't taken those risks, we might not be where we are today. Now, I could have that conversation about October 7th, but then we'd get into a lot of trouble, so we're not going to do that. But we will say, right, that every big development starts with small actions. We did a photography workshop a couple of weeks ago at the CAIR office with a renowned protest photographer, Brooke Anderson, and she showed us like all of these historical photos of protests and of movements and of rallies. And she said nobody ever talks about the fact that somebody had to plan the protest. Somebody had to tell Rosa Parks, like, hey, this is the day that you're going to sit on the bus, and this is the backup plan, right? When they had the boycotts of the buses, when they had the diner sit-ins, that didn't just happen. When kids were desegregating schools in the South, there were meetings, there were conversations. Oh my God, there was somebody who had to put together the meeting minutes, everybody's favorite task. And so every time, and so she said this to say, we don't always take pictures of that stuff, and we should. And we don't always uplift or glamorize that stuff, but we should, because the things that we glamorize don't just happen in a vacuum. Somebody had to say, this is how we're going to do it. Somebody tried and failed. Somebody took one step and it wasn't the right step, and so they had to course correct. Somebody felt all alone in the work that they were doing. So how do we think about this, right? And like, why do we think about it? I always want to win, right? Like, who doesn't want to win? I always want to do the big stuff. I always want to do the interesting stuff. But that's not who we are as Muslims. And so a lot of times I have to look back inwards and say, okay, let's recalibrate. As Muslims, we know that every atom's weight of good is rewarded that way, right? That's smiling at someone when you walk in here. That is that one tweet that you didn't really, like, you're just like, why am I going to repost it? No one's going to read it. But actually it mattered, right? It affected the algorithm. Oh my God, the other day we were at Trader Joe's and we said something about like hair oil, and then we started to get advertisements for hair oil. Don't underestimate. Everything is listening. Everything affects the algorithm. And I say that to say, like, you may think, like, what is this? Like, what is the point, right? Like, I can't watch one more video of a beheaded child in Gaza. But when you do and you share it, it has an impact, right? When you take care of your parents, that has an impact. When you put your heart into everything at work, when you have an uncomfortable conversation at work, it has an impact. Every small detail. So never belittle anything. And we see this, right? And what's the context we see this in a lot is BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions. Well, if I drop Coca-Cola, it's not really going to make a difference. If I drop McDonald's, it's not really going to make a difference, except it does. Does the company shut down? Okay, they closed a few stores here and there, like they reported a loss in profits. But are they going anywhere because you did something about it? And this is the second place I recalibrate, because I want to win, and I'm not always going to win. The other place I recalibrate is like, I want to see the outcome. Like, I want to know, like, wow, like that happened. And it went from A to B. Have you all seen that meme? It's a meme, what do they call it meme? It's like a graphic. It goes around on Instagram. If you have a self-help algorithm and you're looking up like how to be better. And it's like progress is not a straight line, it's a zigzag, right? And it's like all over the place and it's chaotic. That's how social movements work. Right, and that's like why starting with Syria makes sense too, because it doesn't go from protest to overthrow to like peace and governance. No, it's like something in between, all along the way. And so you're not always going to see the impact of your deeds, but that's not what we're called to as Muslims. We are called to strive for the sake of Allah, right? We are called to make the effort. That is where the reward is. And something that we've said a lot in thinking about even in Gaza in this last now 500 plus days is Gaza will be free. Like, I want to be really clear in case any of you doubt that. The people of Palestine will walk free. The people of Syria will walk free. Indigenous people and Black people in this country will walk free. But will you be a part of it? Right? Like, that's the outcome is written. Question is, what are you doing? Like, how are you striving for that? How are you striving for that? And honestly, the thing that keeps me up at night is like, how will I answer for it? Like when Allah says, like, girl, you were, I mean, he's not gonna say girl, but like when he said this, he's not gonna say sis, that was gonna be my next one. I really like to think that this is gonna be an easy accounting afterwards, but I don't know. What did you do? Like, you were sitting in Los Gatos, you had a roof over your head, you have a pumpkin latte at the masjid. People don't have masajid. One of the things that struck me after the Assad family fell is, somebody said this is that following Friday at Jummah across Syria would be the first one where like the imams weren't restricted by Bashar al-Assad. Like, what? I know, like, and I want you all to know, and you all should be following this and be really involved. You all are currently restricted by some racist neighbors and some backward city policies. And so this masjid has its work cut out for it. But you're also sitting in this beautiful room with a pumpkin latte. Like, what is privilege if not this? And so I want you to know and believe that every just outcome we are seeking will come to fruition. But it will be with or without us. And so what are you going to do about it? So every good deed, no matter how small, matters and has an impact. You may or may not see it in the short term. But our command as Muslims is to strive for the best. Like, it's not strive for victory. In fact, I mean, yes, seek victory, do good work. But people live and die without seeing victory. I talked about the people who were released from the prisons in Syria. Of course, we know there are people who died in those prisons. And so many horrible things that happen between that are far worse than death. The last thing I'll say about sort of where I recalibrate is we have to do it till the end. A lot of times when we're thinking about, and this is funny for me because I chose this as my job, but we think about retirement as Americans, right? Like 55, 60, I'll collect the pension, I'll go move somewhere. But guess what? Like, the call for justice is something that we're doing all the way until the end. I've got two great team members here. I'll introduce them to you without embarrassment. Maybe I'll embarrass them a little bit, but Fatima is ready. Fatima is on our team as a community canvasser, and Fizza is on our team, who started as a community canvasser and now works with me. And so Fizza gave me this beautiful painting of a young boy who, like, the fire is coming, but like he's planting a tree, right? And he keeps planting. And so I don't know, I want to tell you that victory comes, right? And when I say that, be mindful that it can come in this life or the next. But this life is one where we are constantly striving. There's no like end, like maybe right at the end, and I don't know if we live to see that, but we're gonna keep going. And so when you're facing obstacles in doing small deeds, I want you to know that's what's expected. It's almost like if you don't face obstacles, we used to say this when we were younger, is like, oh my gosh, you've had like 3 good days in a row, something really bad is coming. If you're not facing obstacles in your work, then you might not be pushing the right buttons. Among those of us who, do the type of work I do, it's like, well, has a Zionist organization come after you? Are you on Canary Mission? Because if you're not on Canary Mission, you might not really be doing enough for Palestine. And for those of you that are single, I have been told it's a really good marriage website as well. You can ask, you pray 5 times a day, do you see them at the masjid, but are their politics aligned? Like that's what Canary Mission will tell you, right? It does a far better job than Minder or Muslim. Because they don't tell you political alignment, guys, like they don't. They don't tell you religious alignment these days. So that's how I'm thinking about small deeds. Every small deed makes a difference. You may or may not see the outcome right away, and you've got to keep doing it. We are not placed here to be comfortable. And we are so comfortable. A couple of years ago, when Justice Brett Kavanaugh was being confirmed to the Supreme Court, and there were hearings happening on the Senate side, there were a number of groups that had organized protests outside of the Senate building, and what we were doing is we were going into the Senate hearings and taking turns interrupting them. And for a lot of people, it was their first time engaging in civil disobedience in that setting, and I will always remember something that Linda said. She said, Linda starts for those of you who know her, because she was training us as we were getting ready to go, and she said, you're going to be uncomfortable, but that's where growth happens. It happens at the edge of comfort. When we think about 2025 resolutions, if you're already praying 5 times a day, then it's not a resolution to pray 5 times a day in 2025. It's like, okay, how do I incorporate the hajj, right? If you are, oh my God, if you are like me and you're eating ice cream daily, then a 2025 resolution might be like, in your 40s, you can't do that anymore, and you've got to reduce it to 3 times a week, right? But that's where growth happens. We get the, right? When we think about how, and this is true for everything, right? Like for those of you that are using AI in your work, the first time you do it, it's strange. And if you're not doing it, you're like, what? It's going to replace me. Because like, if you don't learn and keep up, you get replaced. And so as you're thinking about what to pick up, how to pick it up, be open to the idea of discomfort. And that can look like a lot of things. I take for granted how casually I wear my keffiyeh everywhere. Sometimes I don't because I wear my hijab, and it's like, gosh, it's just a lot to wear as a Muslim woman. But when I want to pick it up and I want to wear it, I don't think about it. For those of you who haven't worn it to an airport or you haven't worn it outside, it's going to be uncomfortable the first time you do it. For those of you that have Zionist colleagues, maybe you haven't interrupted them in the last 500 days. Find a day to interrupt them. It's going to be uncomfortable. Be open to that. There's no growth if I'm just doing the same thing every day, right? It's so hard reconciling this. It's like, oh, well, this is hard. Yeah, it's supposed to be hard. But sitting here, being here, and again, in this very privileged bubble that, mashallah, we live in, I don't know, I'm so happy about my fucking latte. It's really good. But guys, this is an experience, right? That people don't have. And we will be asked, what did we do with this? So I talked about Syria. I talked about Gaza. I want to just give you a couple more examples of like small things in recent history that have made an impact. Do you guys remember when Black Lives Matter started? I mean, it was just a hashtag. It was 3 Black women activists who knew each other, and Trayvon Martin had been killed. And Trayvon Martin was not the first young Black man to be killed on camera. Initially, when I was organizing my notes for this, I was going to give you all the example of Rodney King. Have any of you heard of Rodney King? So Rodney King was beaten by police in Los Angeles. I think it would have been the late 80s, early 90s. And back then, there were no cell phone cameras. the meeting was recorded on a camcorder, like on a handheld camcorder. And that was one of the first times a police beating of a Black man went viral. Fast forward to Trayvon Martin, and everybody's got a cell phone. He's killed. And 3 Black women take to Twitter, and it's like Black Lives, like hashtag Black Lives Matter, like that's it. And it's been used, I wrote this down because I was like, how do you measure impact when you start a hashtag? Here's how. As of March 2023, that hashtag Black Lives Matter has been tweeted over 44 million times. In the summer of 2020, when George Floyd was killed, they were looking at 160,000 daily tweets. All they did was like write hashtag Black Lives Matter. And there's so many like examples of little things that come up when we look at Black Lives Matter as a movement that are worth like us stopping for, right? So there's the hashtag. There's the act of recording. Something that a lot of people don't realize, and we do a separate training on this, but if you've got an iPhone, are there any Android users in here? Oh, mashallah, okay. We have reached 100% iPhone status at the CAIR office, and it's not on purpose, it's just like all of them are evil, so I'm not like biased, it's just funny because I don't know how to do it on Android. But most people don't realize that, like, have you ever given someone your phone and they can't get into the camera, and it's like, it's really easy, it's just the button right here. That's it, right? You turn it sideways and you hit record and you've got a video of something happening. Something as small as when you see the police pull someone over, you stop and you record, has the impact of, may Allah protect the person that's been pulled over, but if they are harmed or killed, you have video of it. It puts the police on notice that you're paying attention, right? It gets you familiar with your rights and the rules around recording the police in public, which, by the way, the short answer to that is you can always record a public official in the public. They should have zero expectation of privacy. Happy to have a longer conversation about it, but like when we sit and we take Black Lives Matter for granted, and I don't want to tell you that they've accomplished their mission, they haven't. Like there's still ongoing brutality of police, and I think by some studies, the police have beaten or killed more people since summer 2020. Like those numbers have gone up. But there is an awareness of it. It's 15 years ago when I started at CAIR, I would go to certain masajid and they'd be like, oh, a hate crime happened, can we call the police? And I've actually seen that number decreasing. And what I mean by that is more and more masajid are having honest conversations about, are we really safer because the police were here? Literally 3 women on like maybe on their laptops, on their cell phones, putting out hashtag Black Lives Matter. So fast forward to where we are now. There's a woman on the city council in Fremont, Teresa Cox. She is imperfect, like every politician. I'm never gonna perfect politicians in our area that you should all know, of course, is your own Bilal Aftab, right? The vice mayor of the city of Saratoga. But we really like him. The others are kind of meh. So we like him, we don't like him, we disagree with him. None of them are perfect. I say that to say Teresa Cox. So I told somebody, I was like, Teresa Cox is a friend of the community. And they were like, no, she's not. And I was like, well, you know what? She came to my event. She stayed the whole time. She's imperfect. She ran for city council again. She lost by 41 votes. 41 votes. That's not like in your area, but you all, oh, hi, Kizzer. So I introduced Fatima and Fizza, that's Kizzer. The last time Kizzer came into the room, I was here, I told everyone he was my boss and it caused a lot of confusion. We're gonna keep with that, that's my boss, and then they're my bosses. Please ask him any questions about how you disagree with me afterwards. She lost by 41 votes. If I ever hear that Bilal Aftab loses an election by 41 votes, I will come for all of you personally. But it's so small. It's just one vote. It's just one. What does it matter? It matters when she's replaced by somebody who has no relationship with the community, right? It matters when she's replaced by somebody who might be oppositional to the community. And to be fair, I don't know the guy, so I'm not like commenting on him personally. I'm just saying, like, hey, like Think about these small things. And then what are some examples from CAIR? In 2011, Hani Khan, who I didn't know, well, she was 19. Some of you guys are 19 maybe. I had actually gone to her masjid to do outreach a couple of times, and I remember the masjid leadership said to me, they're like, you only come here when you want money. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, I always need money, that's my job. Which, by the way, Siraat folks, do you guys take monthly donors? Where are the Siraat? Yes, you do. You have a monthly donor program. Yes. Okay, all of you should be monthly donors to Siraat. Every single one of you. Because that team works quietly behind the scenes and pulls together events every week, and they ask for nothing in return. But they have to feed you all. And they bring in vendors and they bring in speakers. And so if you are not a monthly donor to Siraat, please sign up to be one. And if that commitment feels too overwhelming or just like something you can't do right now, I would suggest that you make at least a donation to Siraat between now and the end of the year. If you have not given to Siraat at least once this year, do that. Because their growth, their sustenance relies on you. And I'm a big believer in making sure that like we pay for what we benefit from. And so they didn't ask me to say this. The fact that no one's like raising their hand to be like, here, come here, give me the QR code, makes me a little bit nervous, but all of you need to donate to Siraat. So in 2011, Hani Khan comes to me at this masjid. The masjid is like, all you ever really want from us is money. And I was like, no, I'm here to help. And so for those of you that don't know Hani's story, she was working at Hollister, which is an Abercrombie & Fitch sort of offshoot. And she had been hired wearing her headscarf. They told her, you just wear it in blue, gray, or white. Those are the company colors. And she'd been working regular job, right? Who's had a mall job before? Clearly a room of privilege, guys. I mean, I've also never had one, but like, so she had a mall job. Sorry. Mall jobs are hard. Like, once in a while, they assign you to clean the restroom. Most of us have never had to clean a restroom outside of our own house, and some of you have never even done that. Anyhow, she's doing great. It's not a problem. One day, a regional manager walks in and is like, what is that thing on her head? Like, literally, that's about the reaction he had. He doesn't talk to her. He goes to the store manager. The store manager is like, well, and the regional manager is like, nope, send her home. Send her home, like mid-shift, which like is also something that shouldn't happen to you because you generally are paid for the full shift once you show up because the employer promised you work. She comes to us, we met her at this masjid thing, and she says, what do I do? So we send her a letter, a little brochure or a letter, she takes it back in, and they're like, we'll call you after we talk to our lawyers. They talk to their lawyers, and their lawyers tell them, here's what you offer Hani. Hani, we will accommodate you by allowing you to wear your headscarf up until you clock in. And then you can take it off. And then when you leave, you can put it back on. That was what they offered her. And in this moment, right, like we're talking about small acts of defiance. Well, we started out talking about small acts of good deeds, but sometimes defiance is a good deed. So Hani says, no, like that doesn't make any sense. They fired her on the spot. Like, that's it. Bye, have a nice day, have a nice life. She comes back to us. And at this point, I was like a second-year lawyer. I wrote their general counsel a letter. They wrote me back a big, long letter. I got all intimidated and scared. I called somebody older and more senior than me. And we were like, now we're going to fight this, right? It took us 3 years to move that case to resolution. Hani was one of 3 women who all sought employment at an Abercrombie & Fitch affiliate, and all of whom were targeted because of their headscarves. The other 2 actually never got the job. And so between the 3 of them, the one, Samantha, based in Oklahoma, goes all the way to the Supreme Court. There's a woman in Milpitas, and then there's Hani up in Foster City. We combined the cases, and we fought. We fought Abercrombie & Fitch for 3 years. One of my favorite parts of this story is like some company in Ohio was like, oh no, but that doesn't fit our California brand look. I was like, you're not from. Ultimately, We settled the case. Hani was paid out some amount, that was public, I would tell you, I just don't remember it. They were required to do trainings for their managers. They were required to change their policies, and I am so petty when I'm up against an Islamophobe or a racist or a Zionist. My favorite part of the settlement was that for 3 years, they had to report to us every 6 months. I was like, oh, report card from this big evil company. As an aside, the CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch at the time was recently discovered to be involved in sex and human trafficking, which is just disturbing, yeah. None of these people are just bad in one way, they're bad in all the ways. But every 6 months they had to tell us how the policy was implemented. Hani said, I am going to wear my headscarf to work. The first beneficiary of the new policy at Abercrombie & Fitch was a Sikh American who was allowed to wear their turban to work. She could not have anticipated that when she got fired. And I don't know if any of you have ever been fired. It is not a fun experience. Nobody walks, no matter how right or wrong you are or how right or wrong the employer is, getting fired sucks. Getting fired for your religious beliefs and practice, right? So she could have anticipated it when she said, I'm gonna wear my headscarf. She could not have anticipated it when she sat through the deposition and they were like, well, we saw this on your Facebook. And what about this? And you said this to this reporter. Has anyone here ever been deposed? Also not a fun experience. It's 6 to 8 hours in a closed room on camera with the other side's attorneys asking you whatever they want. And then your attorney trying to figure out how to make sense of all of that. And the first beneficiary was a Sikh American. 19-year-old Hani changed company policy so that anyone who wanted to wear religious attire could do so. The second story I wanted to tell you from CAIR is something that's a little bit resonant because we have a new administration coming in. One of our supporters recently told me, and I thought this was interesting, is nobody likes Donald Trump. Do we have any Donald Trump fans in the room? Don't raise your hand. It's rhetorical. But we are also, there's something different about Donald Trump this time than last time. And I think it's mostly because of how terrible the Democrats have also demonstrated themselves to be. So what the supporter said to me is, most people did not run to Donald Trump this time. That's not what happened. In our community's case, right? Obviously, lots of Americans ran to him. He won in ways the Democrats should still be crying about. He spent $1 billion and ended their campaign with a $20 million deficit. Isn't that wild? The Democrats, and that doesn't include all of the PACs and everyone else supporting them, the super PACs, the hidden money, and the corporations. That was just the campaign. And Donald Trump won every single swing state, the popular vote and the electoral vote, with about a third of the budget. So when I say people didn't run to him, America ran to him. But in our community, it was different. We ran away from the Democrats, is essentially what it looked like happened. So I don't know what January 2025 will look like. I know there might be chaos. I know there are people who are less privileged than us that are a lot more fearful than we are. But I also want you all to be ready for the fight of our lifetimes, right? What happens in the next 4 years sets the course for our country. We've taken 8 steps backwards. We're also closer to our true identity as the United States of America, so it is what it is. But anyhow, when Donald Trump campaigned in 2015 and 16, he ran entirely on the promise of a Muslim ban. And some of you may have heard me tell this story before, but I wanted to make sure to lift it up tonight when we're thinking about small things that make a difference. December 2015, he says, we are going to ban Muslims from coming into the United States until we can figure out what's going on. And then he says that over and over again, more than 24 times in 2016. And then in January 2017, when he takes office, in his first week in office, he signs a Muslim ban. If you're from Iraq, Iran, Syria, Somalia, Libya, or Yemen, you are immediately barred from coming to this country. And if you were on a plane on your way into the country, you are no longer allowed to land in the country. Like, that's what it was. It was, they said it was malice tempered by incompetence. Because the way the original Muslim ban is written, it addresses, like, it bans green card holders also, which you can't do in that same way that you can ban visa holders. It also didn't anticipate that there are planes mid-air en route to the United States that are going to cause chaos at the airports. And so the first plane that lands at JFK. And there's a number of different people on the plane. Oh wow, this is like a weird kind of trigger. Okay, so there's a number of people on the plane who are impacted. One of them is a woman who is Sudanese American, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Somalia, Libya, Sudanese. She's got a green card. She's a PhD student. She was doing research abroad, and she knows the ban is coming, so she keeps trying to book a ticket to come to the United States. And she finally gets a ticket. She has a connecting flight. And have you ever been the person at the back of the plane that needs to get through? And you've got a connecting flight, and you're just like, how do I squeeze past? Somebody didn't let her get through. She missed her connection. Like, it happens. Don't be a jerk, but the point of this one is don't be a jerk. She misses the connection, so she lands at JFK after the ban is signed. And as a result, she's detained for over 6 hours. She's moved from one part of the airport to the other. She's questioned about her political opinions. She's eventually released because she's a green card holder, but like, that's an example of how like one small thing causes a ripple effect that's actually really bad. Anyhow, she's one of several people who are detained. The attorneys in New York who received them make calls across the country at like 1 a.m. It's like Friday night, Saturday morning, 1 a.m. This is what's happening. JFK is the biggest airport in the country. All of you are going to have chaos tomorrow. Let us teach you based on what happened today. Saturday comes and every airport in the country is in chaos. SFO, LAX, everything in Dallas, DC, etc. And for those of you that may not remember how this went, there were lawsuits that were being filed like every other day. And depending on the decision you got, in which part of the country, it impacted how somebody sitting in Iraq decided to book their tickets. So I remember there was a woman that would call me every couple of days. She was trying to find a ticket to get out. She was like, I don't feel safe, but my husband is not a citizen. And if we come together, he's going to be separated, but we can't stay here. And it was literally like, can you fly into Boston today, or do you need to fly into LAX, or should you fly into SFO based on the court decisions? Amid all of that chaos, have you ever been so stressed out that you forget to eat? Okay, most of my life I have the opposite problem. I'm so stressed out I overeat. But there are like these rare instances where it's like I'm forgetting to eat. It's just like you're just moving through the motions. Maybe you're on 3 or 4 hours of sleep. It might be like finals week for those of you that still remember that. And as people are getting tired of protesting at the airports, the food starts to flow into the airports. Have you all heard me talk about this before? Have any of you heard? Okay, good. So good. Well, thank you. We've been protesting at SFO in this example since 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. Airport food is notoriously expensive and poor quality. Like $18 for a sandwich that tastes like paper that was made last week. Alhamdulillah, for the money to do that and for the ability to do it. Where do you get like hygiene products at the airport? I don't even know. So food, hygiene products, right? Like pillows and sleeping bags. At the end of the day, on that first day of protest, people start to get tired. And the organizers are like, don't leave. Ask your family and friends to send supplies to the airport. And so they did. The best buffet I have had in the last 10 years was at SFO the day after the Muslim ban was signed, because you could get all sorts of food. For the CAIR team in particular, this then translated to a number of moms setting up a meal train for our staff. And so if you've ever thought that advocacy or activism has to look a certain way, and I'm always conscious of this when I'm speaking about it, because you're like, well, I'm not Kizrin, I'm not Fatima, I'm not Fizan, I'm not Zahra, so I don't have a job at CAIR. I just gotta go to Google every day to pay the bills. Like, cool. Just gotta go to Meta. Did you know that Mark Zuckerberg donated $1 million to the Trump Transition Fund? if you're going to Meta, take all the free stuff from there. Like really stock it up and then bring it to Siraat, right? Actually, I did some work with a tech company recently, consulting on a project, and somebody, the team was like, please take all the snacks. And I was like, this is kind of awkward. And they're like, no, this is the way we're giving back to the nonprofits. In addition to our donations, we just want to make sure that you take all the snacks. Like, this is our penance. And I was like, okay, please don't donate $1 million to the Trump Transition Fund. He didn't donate to the Biden Transition Fund. I think he's just trying to get in good in the White House, and that's what it is. A lot of times when we look at advocacy and we look at activism, it's like, but I can't do it that way, right? Or I can't do as much as they do. And growing up, I gave my parents a really hard time because my mom chose to be a homemaker. And it was, what's wrong with you? Like, that's your contribution to the world, right? Like, you have a master's degree. I was a brat. Like, you're all sitting here judging me. I was terrible. You have a master's degree and you're gonna sit at home. And she's like, my mom, she's like, this is my choice. Like, that's what feminism is, Zahra, it's my choice. What I didn't see is how many people she was feeding, right? Is that when there was an event at the masjid, she was feeding them. I didn't see it until 20 years later when there was a meal train at the CAIR office that kept us able to respond to every person that was calling saying, I'm in Iraq, what airport do I fly into, right? My parents landed at SFO. There was an Iranian couple, elderly in their 70s. They were held at SFO for 26 hours. They don't speak English, right? Somebody had to feed the lawyers on the other side who had to stay at the airport for that 26 hours. Those are, for me, when I think about small deeds, I think about these examples of like, what are the everyday things that we could be doing? The world around us is on fire, right? If anyone doubts that, we must not be watching the same Instagram reels. And so as you reflect on where you've been in 2024 and you think about what you want to be doing for 2025, like my friend that I almost punched, but I didn't. She was like, what are your resolutions? I was like, shut up. And then we thought about some resolutions. I want you to ask yourself, one, what do I feel most strongly about? And pick something. It doesn't have to be everything. And it doesn't have to be Muslim in nature either. But pick something. I'm going to stop talking for a second, which is really hard for me to do. You can tell they sent me to law school for a reason. I'm going to give you like a minute of silence to be like, what is the thing that I'm going to do, that I'm going to care about, and that I'm going to prioritize in 2025? Oh my God, it's so hard for me to stay quiet. Hopefully you thought about something. If you didn't, you could think about it after the show. So me and ChatGPT had a conversation last night because I figured out how to work out the microphone feature, so I got to talk to it. And then it was creepy to read the transcript back, right? But I was like, okay, how do we go from goals to strategies, to objectives, to tactics? And we did it like 4 times, and I still don't think I have it right. This was all just to make kids are proud and let them know I had a conversation with ChatGPT, like a verbal conversation. Have you all done that yet? It's cool, it's interesting, it's a little bit weird. And I'm told you can pick the voice, which is also kind of weird, but anyhow. Pick a cause. And keep in mind that as Muslims, we believe that Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change themselves. And that's not someone somewhere else. It's not your masjid board, it's not CAIR, it's not even the Siraat leadership, it's you. So what do you feel strongly about? And then set a SMART goal. Actually, ChatGPT told me to call it a SMART objective, but that's fine, whatever. You get it, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. What are you going to do for that cause in 2025? It could be something simple. I am going to become a $30 a month monthly donor to Siraat. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic for most of you, and time bound, right? It could be that I am going to go volunteer on one of the local commissions. How do I do that? Well, you have lots of people in this community who have served on different commissions. And I believe Brother Rezi is getting ready to train people in that. But if you had 2 or 3 more Muslims or friends on the planning commission, your circumstances would be different as a masjid, right? So it could be that I'm going to step up into leadership. It could be I am going to learn how to write to the local newspaper. In Los Altos, the vice mayor, Pete Daly, is a Zionist piece of trash. Yeah, I said that. He is a Zionist piece of trash who, when they had a ceasefire resolution, actually they didn't have a ceasefire resolution in Los Altos, they had a pro-Israel resolution. And he gave like a 10-minute racist tirade about all of the problems with Palestinians in support of Israel. They have a council that rotates, and so he's going to be the mayor next year. Racist Zionist piece of trash is going to be the mayor in Los Altos. I'm going to get into a lot of trouble, but I don't really care because who with five people in Los Altos. Anyhow, when he did that, a group of half a dozen Los Altos residents wrote an op-ed in the Los Altos town crier. Every time somebody searches his name, it comes up. I'm personally contributing to that search engine optimization. I go in there and I click and I link. And then when they announced on Instagram that he was going to be the mayor, I was like, oh, this Pete Daly? And then I linked to that article again. Write something, right? Like, we can't just be upset about Canary Mission all the time. If you don't find your spouse on there, it's useless to you. Write something for Palestine. Write something for your messages. Write something about ethics in AI, right? Write something about the environment. Pick the cause, set a goal. Now, I told you realistic and achievable, but I told you at the beginning that growth happens at discomfort. So push yourself, like really push yourself. Things are bad around us. But it doesn't get better because a couple of people at CAIR did something, or a couple of people in the masjid leadership did something. It actually requires all of you. And that's why one of the questions I asked is like, or one of the things I urged is every single person in this room should have made a donation to Siraat this year. And if you haven't, well, you've got like 2 weeks left for the tax deductible deadline. But please donate to CAIR after you do Siraat, not before, after. But each of us can do something. When we look at what our religion requires of us, it is not that I have to liberate Gaza or that I have to liberate Syria. It's that I live a life where I remember that every deed, no matter how small, carries its weight. Where I am constantly called to justice, where I'm rewarded for striving, and where I have to take ownership, because nothing changes until I start to play my part. I got a 5-minute warning a few minutes ago, so I'm going to stop there. And it looks like there's already a question that I'm going to defer to you to decide. Up to you. This is a really good time to open up your phones, go to the Siraat link tree and make that donation. Really good time.
So the question is, for college, there are some students who are documented, but they are wrongly written down as undocumented students. How can people liberate them?
That's a good, so for those who didn't hear the question, it's about like the immigration status of some local students. And I would say that in that case, it's probably a good idea for them to talk to an immigration attorney to assess why the records are incorrect. And I'll offer that prompts one other way that I think all of us can take a small action. How many of you in this room are Syrian? And can I ask, and this isn't to place blame or responsibility on anyone, but have people been checking in on you guys to say, how are you doing and how's your family? Okay. So that's one small way that we can actually just make a difference, right? Is check in on the Syrians in your life. Check in on the Palestinians in your life. Check in on the African Americans in your life. And as we get ready for a new administration, if you know people who are undocumented, check in on them, right? Like you don't have to do anything complicated. Like this is all like, oh, but I need to offer something specific. And like, do I have to call them? Salam, how are you doing? Just want to say salam and check in on you. That's it. Like, that's it. Like, hey, hope you're well. Like, saw the news, thought of you and your family. That's all you have to do. One of the goals that I've set for myself, or that I am setting for myself as I say it out loud, because I suck at this, like I'm actually really like terrible at it, is can you just check in on one person a week? If you don't have 52 friends, that's fine. Check in on people on a twice a year rotation, but check in on someone, right? And that could be for those of you that live away from your parents, check in on your parents, check in on your wife, and so on. But be there for each other. Thank
Can we lower our voices during the event, please? Thank you. Thank you guys for waiting for the event. Just a couple of announcements. Jazakallah khair, Sister Zahra, for the amazing halakha. This concludes our last pathways for the year. So thank you for being a part of the community and the initiative this year. We really appreciate all the new faces as well as all the old ones. Alhamdulillah, this has been like one of our biggest years of growth. in the last 2.5 years. So we really appreciate all of you guys for coming here. Alhamdulillah. We hope you guys take some time to recharge. We will be having pathways for the next 2 weeks. We will we'll resume January 7th, inshallah, with our beloved Imam al-Barat on January 7th. So please join us then. And then lastly, if you have any feedback for us, good or bad, constructive or not, there is a feedback form going out. Please do fill it out. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And then if you can put in some contact information so we can get some more information from you all, we'd greatly appreciate that. And then if you'd like to also get involved next year, please start thinking through what you'd like to help us with or what you'd like to contribute, time or any other aspects, and we'd love to have you next year, inshallah. With that, Risha is in 3 minutes, so I apologize for the delay.
Assalamu alaikum. Really quickly, I wanted to make an announcement in regards to what Sister Zahra was talking about. Sorry. I know many of you work in tech companies or know somebody that works at a tech company. A lot of these companies do donation matching. So it ends December 31st usually and resets at the end of the year. So just a quick reminder to make sure you reach the limit if possible, or ask your friends if they would like to donate, and make sure you reach that limit. If you want an email draft, I just sent one before Siraat to my coworkers. Make sure you talk to your coworkers about it as well. And inshallah, may Allah reward you guys in summer.